you check your paycheck, $70,000 a year. Your father made $40,000. He owned a house. He raised 3 kids. He took a vacation every summer. You make almost double what he made, adjusted for nothing, and you're still splitting rent with a roommate at 32. Something doesn't add up, but the real reason is far stranger than you're bad with money. You've been told this is about lattes, about avocado toast, about discipline. It isn't. What happened to your paycheck happened decades before you ever earned one, and it happened on purpose. Let's start with the number itself. $70,000 sounds enormous next to $40,000, almost double. But money isn't a fixed thing, it's a moving target. And the target has been moving away from you your entire life. In 1971, something quiet happened that changed everything downstream. The United States severed the dollar from gold. Richard Nixon called it temporary. It wasn't. Before that moment, the amount of money in the world was tethered to something physical, something scarce. After that moment, money could be created with a decision, a meeting, a signature. Why does that matter to your rent? Because when money can be created without limit, more of it chases the same number of houses, the same number of apartments, the same number of everything that can't be printed. Land can't be printed. Housing near jobs can't be printed. So while dollars multiplied, the things worth owning didn't. This is where an economist named Richard Cantillon becomes useful, even though he died 200 years before any of this happened. Cantillon noticed something that most people miss about inflation. New money doesn't land on everyone at once. It lands first on those closest to the source, banks, asset holders, corporations, and only reaches everyday wages last, diluted, delayed, and smaller. Economists still call this the Cantillon effect. Your paycheck arrives late to a party that already raised the price of admission. Your father's $40,000 didn't just buy more because the number was smaller. It bought more because it arrived at a different point in that chain. Wages in the 1970s and 80s still moved roughly in step with what workers produced. Then, sometime in the mid-1970s, something broke. Productivity kept climbing, wages didn't. Economists still argue over exactly why, but the outcome isn't in dispute. The gap between what you produce and what you're paid has been widening for 50 years. Think about your grandparents' generation. A single income could buy a home, could raise a family, could retire with a pension nobody had to think about. Now picture your own math. 2 incomes, no pension. A mortgage rate that makes the same house cost triple what it once did, even after accounting for inflation. Here's where it gets stranger. You'd expect earning more to feel like winning. It doesn't. Why? A psychologist named Daniel Kahneman spent his career studying exactly this feeling, the gap between what should make you happy and what actually does. Kahneman and his research partner Amos Tversky found that humans don't measure wealth in absolute terms. They measure it relative to a reference point. Your reference point isn't some neutral bar. It's your parents. It's your neighbors. It's the version of adulthood you were promised as a child. $70,000 was never going to feel like enough, because the goalposts you're comparing yourself to were set by a different economy entirely. This is sometimes called the hedonic treadmill, and it explains something crucial. Even if your salary rises every year, your sense of security won't rise with it, because the cost of the milestones that define adulthood, a home, healthcare, a retirement that doesn't terrify you, has risen even faster. Now layer in housing specifically, because housing is where this story becomes personal. In the decades after World War II, the United States built housing at a scale that hasn't been matched since. Zoning was looser, land was cheaper, suburbs sprawled outward because nothing stopped them. Then, starting in the 1970s and accelerating for decades after, restrictive zoning laws spread through nearly every desirable city in the country. Fewer units could legally be built. Demand kept growing, supply didn't. An economist named Milton Friedman used to say inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. He was talking about the money supply broadly, but the same logic applies with brutal precision to housing. When you restrict what can be built while the number of dollars in the system keeps expanding, the price of what remains doesn't rise gently. It rises violently. Your father bought his house before that restriction fully took hold. You're buying, if you're buying at all, after it. Then came 2008. The global financial crisis wiped out millions of homeowners, but it did something else too. Institutional investors, private equity firms, and large funds started buying single-family homes at scale, something that almost never happened before that decade. They weren't buying homes to live in them. They were buying homes as assets, the same way you'd buy a stock. Every home purchased that way is a home permanently removed from the pool available to people like you, competing not against another family, but against a fund with unlimited capital and no emotional urgency to stop bidding. You start to see the shape of it now. This was never one single villain. It's a system, built decision by decision, incentive by incentive. most of them made before you were born, all of them compounding by the time your first paycheck landed in your account. So what do you actually do with this? Not despair, clarity. First, stop measuring your progress against your parents' economy. It's not the same game, and beating yourself up for not matching it isn't discipline, it's misdiagnosis. Second, understand that in an economy shaped by the Cantillon effect, proximity to assets matters more than the size of your paycheck. This is why financial writers like Benjamin Graham spent entire careers insisting that owning productive assets, even small, unglamorous ones, protects you in ways that save cash never will. Cash sitting still loses to a system designed to dilute it. Assets, even modest ones, ride the wave instead of drowning in it. Third, recognize that your sense of falling behind is partly real and partly a trick of comparison. The real part deserves real solutions, index funds, home ownership pursued earlier rather than later, negotiating wages with the knowledge that they lag productivity on purpose. The comparison part deserves something gentler. Forgiveness for a race that was rigged before you laced up your shoes. You check your paycheck again. $70,000. It's still not what your father's $40,000 could buy. But now you know why, and knowing why changes what you do next. The economy didn't shrink your money by accident. It was redesigned quietly over 50 years to reward the people who already owned things. The only real revenge is becoming one of them.